Okay guys, welcome back. Dr. H here on behalf of Octo Beard Media, and this is the 5th out of 6 tutorials on Maya, the modeling and animation program. And today I'm going to get into how to do a little bit of animation in this animation program finally. So I've created a sphere here. This is going to be a ball. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make the ball bounce up and down, and I'm going to make it change its shape. This is a fairly standard Maya tutorial here. So in order to get into this, we need to talk about the timeline down here. Now, anyone familiar with video editing will be familiar with the basic timeline layout. This is a screen grab here from lynda.com. So you've got timeline, and you put different clips on there, you put different sound underneath, and each layer on the timeline controls a different thing. So this might control video, another one up here might have still pictures, this might be the sound that goes with the video, this might be the background music. Maya works slightly differently because, as you can see here in Premiere, you've got lots of different tracks that you can put things onto. In Maya, there's really only ever one track on the timeline. So let's talk about some of the things that we can see down here. So we've got the timeline itself, which you can move along like so by dragging. You can also push play, and it will run the length of the visible timeline and just repeat until you press stop. Usually a good idea to take it back to 1 when you've done that. Down here we've got some numbers. So this is the first number of the whole project, of the whole timeline, and this is the last number of the whole project. And these two numbers here are the numbers that are in view. So if I drag that along, you can see now frame 19 to frame 138 are in view. If I drag that back and extend that, then you'll see now I've got the full 200 frames in view. I might want to drop it down and work with just, say, I don't know, 48 frames in the first instance. So in an earlier tutorial, we talked about the number of frames per second, and I said that if you're a beginner using Maya, 24 frames per second is a good number of frames to have because it's divisible by 2 and 3 and 4 and 6 and 12. Now I'm going to show you why that matters. So in order to use the timeline here, you have to create keyframes, and that's done quite simply by pushing S on the keyboard, which will set a keyframe. You'll notice that when I do, all of these values go red. It's possible to set keyframes for any of these values here, but for the moment we're just going to use the translate values. We're just going to send this ball up and down. So I'm just going to quickly undo my keyframe here because I don't want my ball falling through the floor. Move it 1 up on the timeline so it starts life on the floor. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say over 48 frames, which is the equivalent of 2 seconds, 24 frames per second, so 48, double that is 2 seconds. It's going to bounce up in the air, and it's going to come back down to where it is now. Now the way you do this is you think about the start point and the end point first. You set keyframes for those, and then you fill in the middle. Let me show you what I mean. So I want it to start life and finish life exactly here. So I'm going to set a quick keyframe at 1. I'm then going to drag all the way to 48. I'm going to set another keyframe, and then I'm going to come to the middle to 24, because at the middle point, if this is smooth motion, it should be the furthest away from where it is at the start. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take it up to 4 on the timeline, roll back a little bit, like so, like that, and I'm going to push S to set a keyframe. If I go back to 1 here and push play, what it should do now is move slowly up and slowly back down over the course of a couple of seconds. And we can see there I've got the basic motion. Now it doesn't look much like a ball at the moment because it's not deforming. We can fix that. So I'm going to switch tools to the scale tool. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set where I want it to be at the start. Now, having done this a few times, I know that when the ball lands on the floor, it squishes down a little bit like that. So I've squished it. Now, because I've squished it, it's come up off the floor here. So I may need to modify the other keyframe. So for the sake of ease, I'm just going to make this 0.8. The reason I'm doing it mathematically is because I'm going to want to do exactly the same at the other end. So now I'm going to set another keyframe on the timeline. So what it's done is it's put that keyframe on top of the other keyframes on the same timeline, which means you have to keep track of what you're putting keyframes there for. So I'm going to go to 48. And I'm going to take that back to 0.8 as well. I'm going to set that. So now we've got a little bit of deforming. It's kind of bouncing up and down. It's bouncing up and down. In the middle, it goes back to 1. In the middle, it shouldn't go to 1. In the middle, it should kind of deform the other way. It should kind of stretch a little bit like that maybe. So let's make it 1.2 since it's going to 0.8 in the other ones. And again, set that keyframe with S. So this timeline down here is now holding information for, I've just double clicked it to highlight it, is now holding information for the translate values and the scale values all in the one timeline. Let's push play and see what happens. So what I've got now is I've got a little bit more sort of realistic movement. It's stretching and deforming slightly, but it's not coming back to the floor where I wanted it because I've changed the shape. So if I just quickly frame in on this, eyeball this back down to what I think is the floor here, it's going to be 0.8, isn't it? Yep. So I'm going to put that to 0.8. I'm going to reset the keyframe. As soon as I push S down here on the keyboard, it's going to reset that at 0.8. Going to do the same thing here. Make that 0.8 so it goes down to the floor. Set it. And then let's play. Oops, roll back a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. And there we go. That's basic animation. Now, there are ways to make it more realistic, ways to make it more complicated. You can get into the graph editor, and in later tutorials, we'll take a look at that. But just in terms of understanding the way Maya handles animation, this simple keyframing exercise is quite useful, because once you've keyframed it to do this, you can keyframe it to do anything else. So for example, maybe my ball isn't just bouncing up and down on the spot. Maybe my ball is bouncing forwards. So this is the Z-axis, this is forwards, or I can push the space bar and I can find top, front view and side view here. So I might want side view. Just ignore this thing in the background, this is something else. I want the side view to make it kind of hop forwards. But I'm just going to do this in the main window here. So I need to figure out which way is forwards. This way is forwards here. I'm going to set some more keyframes, this time to control the Z-axis forwards. So it's this box here. So it's going to start off at 0. That's fine. It's going to end up at 48 at, let's say, 4. Something that's nice and easy to divide by. Press S to set the keyframe. So now it's jumping up there, and then suddenly it starts to move there. Now, why is it starting to move there? Well, it's because I have another motion keyframe here that tells it it's supposed to be all the way up here. It doesn't tell it that it needs to be halfway along to here. So I've set this to 4, so I'll now set this to 2. And save that. And what it's now doing is it's jumping up in the air, and it's jumping forwards like so. So I could make it a little bit more realistic. When it takes off, it's probably going to put a little bit of effort into it, a little bit of welly into it. So maybe it's going to kind of start life at 10 degrees like that. I'm going to set that. By the time it gets to here, it's kind of come up to maybe -10. Now it's going to go back, it's going to land down. I'm going to set that, and then by the time it comes to here, it's starting to lean forwards again to +10. Ready, set that for the next bounce. So if I play this now, it's kind of bouncing along like that, and it's starting to look a little bit more realistic. So that's how to control simple animation in Maya with keyframes. I'm just going to stop this. I'm going to delete my ball, because what I want to do now is I want to focus on a different kind of animation. So what I've done here is I've created this really simple kind of airship blimp object here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this blimp fly zigzag across my path. Now, in order to do this, we're going to need to use curves, which are up here on the shelf and can be found in Create Curve Tools down here. And the CV Curve Tool or the EP Curve Tool are probably what you're going to want to use. I'm going to jump in with the CV Curve Tool here. What the CV Curve Tool allows me to do is click little points like so. I'm going to click one there, click another one there, I'm going to click another one there, and I'm setting the kind of motion here. And because it's a curve, obviously it's going to automatically try and curve it round, give it the smoothest possible motion like so. I'm really going to make this guy kind of work for it and fly around like that before finishing off there. Now that at the moment is a flat curve on the plane of my grid here. If I want to bring that curve up, well, there's lots of things I could do. The easiest way to do it, oops, sorry, I have to hit enter when you've finished and it turns to a curve. The easiest way to do it is just to rotate it like that and then bring the start point up like that if I want it to take off, or if I want it to, if I undo that, if I want it to kind of fly this way or that way or whatever else. But what you can also do, if you hold the right mouse button, is it brings up the wheel options. Now you'll see the wheel options are different in curve mode because curve doesn't have all the things that polygons have. It doesn't have faces, it doesn't have edges, it is just one big edge, but it does have vertices. So if I come off that, I can see all the vertices here and I can select them. So if I select this vertex, for example, I could bring this one vertex up, which would be quite a severe thing to do. Or if I put soft select back on, down here, just move this to one side, then I could bring up in a little bit more of a smooth pattern like that. And you can play around with this all day until you're happy with where you want it to go. I'm going to bring that up a bit more, and I'm going to bring that finally up like so. And it's going to go in this kind of weird roller coaster pattern here. And again, when you're done, you can just go back to object mode and you get your curve back like so. Going to cancel this move tool here. So the final thing you need to do, you need to go into the animation menu here, because what we're going to do is we're going to attach this object to this motion path and make it move. So I'm going to select the object, shift select the motion path, and then I'm going to go up to constrain motion path, and I'm going to attach the object to the motion path here. So what I can do now is I scrub through the timeline. You can see it's already, I'm doing it backwards here. If I push play, it's going to fly along the predetermined path. Now it's always going to default to the number of frames that you have in view. So if I just undo my attachment back to there and maybe give myself a few more seconds, let's give myself 10 seconds. I'm going to go for 240 frames. You'll notice that the maximum number has increased because there are 240 frames in view. There must now be 240 frames in my whole scene. I could give myself 2000 frames in my whole scene, but still only got 240 frames in view. And you can see how this shrinks down here. If I now go to constrain motion path and attach the object, it attaches it over the course of however many frames are in view. So now it's a 10-second traversing rather than a simple 2-second. One of the other things you can do if you go into the object's motion path here is you can change its twist along the axes. So I'm going to get to kind of roughly halfway through my animation here, and I'm going to say, well, maybe I want it to have flipped upside down by now. Maybe I want it to have twisted or banked a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little bit of front twist on here, maybe 10. Let's see what this looks like. So it's just turned it slightly. If I frame it on the object, you see, if I just undo that, it's turned it slightly. If I make the front twist maybe 50 degrees instead, then suddenly it's really starting to kind of flip round like so. And if we push play, you can see the object moving around as it gets through the scene. So we've looked at two animation techniques today. We've looked at the basic keyframing animation method using the translate, the rotate and the scale tools and setting keyframes with S on the keyboard. And we've looked at using motion paths, which you draw using curves and then attach with constrain motion path, attach to motion path. I've been Dr. H on behalf of Octo Media. Thank you very much for watching this tutorial and do please hit subscribe.